Welcome, fellow Blockbench artists. What you are watching is a time-lapse of me modeling an animated cosmetic for our summer collection. Animated items are always top sellers in the crate collections, so naturally we like to produce as many as we can. However, as you might guess, with anything that's even slightly more complex, you risk having a larger file size. Over time, as the server accumulates a higher volume of the large files, it can really slow things down. So your challenge as a content artist is to figure out how to make the item as uncomplicated as possible while still being able to tell what that item is. I figured talking through my thought process in this video would help other modelers come to similar conclusions in their own work. So you'll get to see how much my original design changes for the better. Let's get into it. What I start off with is 10 cubes, 5 different positions for the kite, and 5 for the string. By creating the model this way, we can simulate movement by alternating which blocks have visible textures along a timeline. Currently, I'm making sure that the 5 different kite blocks are the same size before I begin to paint on the kite texture. My goal with this first model was to emulate the way kites often sway side to side when you fly them. Since I know the animation will loop, I only need 5 positions, or frames, in my animation. One easy tip that you can implement today is using 2D planes as often as possible throughout your models. This cuts back on the amount of faces you have to texture and thus leaves you with a smaller texture file. To be fair though, when animating motion with texture files, you're gonna have a harder time keeping that file small, because for however many frames you have, you'll need the space within that texture to duplicate the design once for each frame. Once I'm happy with the kite design, I can select that portion of the texture and copy and paste it to my other 4 2D cubes. I go ahead and start troubleshooting the string texture, paying attention to where the string would connect to the kite at the top, but also where the player will hold the string in their hand at the bottom. I only need to paint 3 string textures, one for the lowest point, one for the midpoint, and then the highest point in that sequence, and then I'll just copy over the first 2 to my last plane since this will be animated in a loop. Another quick tip, to save myself time, I'm having the 2D cubes share the same UV selection on the texture map. So if you were wondering, how come she only has 5 textures even though there's technically 10 faces, that's why. I simply select UV Mirror X to flip the texture on one side of the cube along the X-axis. That way they match up. Here comes the fun part. Obviously the player isn't holding 5 different kites at once. We need to animate the texture file so that it looks like the player is holding a single kite that sways side to side. So I right-click my texture file on the left and open up the Flipbook animation panel. This is one of many ways people animate textures in Blockbench, but for my purposes, it works fine. I went ahead and duplicated my texture 4 times for a total of 5 frames. And now I simply move from frame to frame, erasing one of the 4 cube positions of the kite, making sure that each frame has one of the 5 positions visible and the other 4 invisible. I copy and paste the frame positions and move them around in that flipbook panel so that the animation will loop properly. Lastly, I play with the frame speed a bit, and then that's it for test 1. It's super clunky and feels very unnatural compared to how kites typically move, so you can tell why I clearly decided to restart. Using the same principle for animating as last time, I attempt to fix the unnatural movement by having the kite bob up and down instead of side to side. Actually, through this project, I learned that you can copy and paste textures across model files, so that was kind of cool. You can see here I went ahead and selected only the kite portion of the texture and copied it 3 more times in the free space of the file. Again, we need space within that texture to have 1 kite per frame. I simply move the UV mapping around after the other 3 are pasted so that each 2D cube is now reading its texture from one of those 3 kites. Don't forget to mirror the underside of the cube's UV. And now I erase the texture so there's 1 position per each frame, this time painting in the strings after and making sure they line up correctly. Again, I'm pretty much doing exactly the same thing here, I just want to show you the various ways I went about it before ending on the final result. I do go back and polish up the string texture, by the way. But yeah, even in test 2, I felt like it was off. It was definitely better, but I felt like the problem was because the movement was way too over-exaggerated. So I went back, removed one of the positions, refined the placement of those positions, and I added kite tails. I went ahead and extended the cube and UV length of 1 kite and painted on tails. I deleted the other cubes and replaced them with the duplicated cube and texture. This third third test only has 5 frames now with a total of 4 cubes, but I already like it much better. My only qualm with it is that the tails feel stiff, so I took the model back to my team and asked for advice. One of our senior designers pointed out that the model could be optimized further by only using 2 cubes and animating the kite position on 1 cube instead of using several.
Of course. Fuck, it's genius. Why didn't I think of that?
In my defense, I had just learned how to simulate motion through animating textures like this, and I was really eager to try to use the technique in my next project, but ultimately he was right. In order to do what's best for the server, I needed to optimize the model once more and bring it down to 2 cubes. I still wanted to try to move the kite around on a figure 8 path, but I wasn't sure how to do that with the static string cube, so I settled on a simple up and down motion. Of course, I still had to go in and fix the kite tails since their movement was way too stiff before, but that was it. Final model 4. This was way cleaner and way more optimized. Moral of the story, I am not an expert, obviously, and there are always new ways to improve in your work. Also, learn from others around you. I hope this video was helpful and you take away at least one thing that you can use in your practice going forward. But yeah, that is it for today. Really short video. I plan on making all kinds of DIY content like this in the future, so if that's something you're interested in, maybe consider subscribing.